We know we want kids to have choice, as much choice as possible in creating the education that is meaningful and helpful for them. That choice can come through choice over content, medium, expression of ideas, types of discussion, seating in the classroom, what to work on when to take a break. There are so many possibilities. If you start making it a professional challenge to see those choice possibilities, honestly, you'll find them everywhere. As I've been working on choice as a theme for the Lighthouse this month, I knew that I wanted to create a final choice board project adaptable for any text that would provide a range of options for students. But I also knew I wanted to avoid the pitfalls of some of the choice projects I've designed in the past, when I ended up having to create 7 different rubrics and rewire myself for a huge range of different requirements for every option as I graded the projects. While I was glad to give my students those choices, it was frustrating how long it took to complete my comments and how confusing it all was. So, this time, I took some of my favorite types of projects, what I've learned since about creating linked hyperdocs that can tie everything together with a nice little electronic bow, and my strong desire for an easy grading situation, and mashed it all up into an adaptable final project with 9 choices, including one that allows students to create their own way to make meaning from what they've studied. So, really, a million choices? I'm going to walk you through my process today so you can do the same thing next time you want to create a choice project with lots of options for your students, gifting them agency as they synthesize what they've learned and create something new. Ready? Let's dive in. Welcome to the Spark Creativity Teacher Podcast, a podcast for English teachers looking for more creativity, more engagement, more joy. And no more scripted curriculum, lesson planning ruts, or boring book lists. I'm Betsy Potash, and I'm honored you're trusting me to help. You're not alone on this creative journey anymore. Okay, so first things first, when you're creating a choice board for a final project, you need to decide what all the different options are going to be and scatter them across your choice board. Here, you don't need a lot of details, right? You need kind of the name of each type of project and a quick teaser what it's going to be. Now, I didn't want to reinvent the wheel and come up with 9 different projects flushed out from scratch. That would be quite the project. And I'm guessing that you probably don't want to do that either. I think when you're differentiating a final project, you draw on the strengths of the past, or if you're newer to teaching, you draw on the strengths you're seeing in your online networking, on your core team. You see what works, and you try to give students a bunch of options in the working world. You don't have to start over on every option. So I tried to draw on the kinds of projects I've loved the most over the years. And I pulled these choices: a 1-pager, a food truck or other type of model project, a video, podcast, app, lightning version performance, creative writing piece, genre adaptation, or, like I said, the wildcard, where students can propose their own project idea. Now, for all of those, I already had existing projects that I could pull from. I wasn't going to pull full curriculum for every project, but I could easily pull like the basic requirements, maybe some examples, etc. So this was very much a project where I was curating the strengths of other projects that I've already worked with rather than reinventing. So do what I did. pull from what you've loved, maybe add 1 or 2 new elements if there are things you're excited to try out or things that go along really well with the certain text that you're working on. So next, I just wanted to create a 1-page descriptor for each project option. In my mind, if you're doing this vast differentiated project choice board, you're probably not going to be able to provide like 10 pages of step-by-step curriculum for each project. By doing a choice project, you're inherently offering a little more freedom to students in how they're going to define it and work through it than if you do one project and it's going to be super hands-on and guided and you're kind of going to do every phase of the project with kids in class. So I just wanted to spell out core requirements, give a little bit of a summary, some hint set directions to start from, maybe link to some models, that kind of thing on these one pagers for each type of project. So I created those. Again, because I was pulling from things that I had done in the past, it didn't have to take forever. And that can be the same for you, right? You've probably done quite a lot of different things with your students, and you can lift from past project descriptions. Now, the next thing I did was to just link all of the project rundowns to the initial core choice board. And my first thought was that I would put every project in its own Google slide deck and link it off of a little link button under each project on the choice board. But instead, I decided to put them all in the same Google slide deck just for simplification. So I didn't have 9 different docs scattered across my Google Drive. So I put a little link button under, for example, one pager, and then I dropped an invisible rectangle over it. This is my favorite trick on Google Slides that you may or may not already know about, but I love it and use it constantly. You just put a shape over the image that you want to link. You make that shape transparent. You make the border around it transparent. Now you just have an invisible button over whatever you want students to be able to click. And then I linked that little invisible rectangle to the slide where my one-pager description was. And I did the same thing and put a little invisible rectangle over the link button I had created under food truck and linked that to the slide where the food truck rundown was, etc., etc. So I was able to create just a very clean visual on the project choice board, and each one links to the slide where kids can get a full description of that project option. Now, the last piece of the puzzle for me was the one that was the most complex, really. I have graded differentiated projects in the past with a lot of frustration, and maybe you have too, because you're trying to figure out, okay, I want every student to have to do about the same amount of work, and I want to have similar requirements, and yet it's really different if a student is writing like a formal paper or creating a soundtrack or doing a food truck. Like, these are very different projects. And so in the past, I ended up creating a rubric for each one, and like a detailed rubric for each one. And my head was just sort of swinging as I moved from project to project and trying to figure out, okay, is this soundtrack, if this is an A, then what does that mean about this formal paper and the level of effort that went into it and the number of mistakes I'm seeing? And it was all just too confusing. And so for this project, I really wanted to make it much simpler and easier on the teacher, but I still wanted students to get plenty of feedback and have a chance to reflect on their work and think about what they did well, how they expanded creatively and analytically, and what they might want to improve upon going forward. So I created 4 different modes of feedback for students. First off, there's a peer feedback sheet. And I have really been digesting and thinking about Felicia Chavez's book, The Anti-Racist Writers Workshop, this year so far. And her idea that sometimes when we open students up to workshop where we just allow peers to critique them, the peer is really projecting their opinions on what makes good writing onto the student being workshopped. And sometimes those opinions are not desired, and they can actually shut down a writer. And sometimes the opinions of the peer critiquing the writer aren't really valid, right? They may not really understand what the writer was trying to do. They may not understand the writer's style. They may not they might just not like the writer's aesthetic, and that doesn't mean that aesthetic is broken or that it needs to be fixed. Sometimes it just means it's different, right? And so in crafting the peer feedback sheet, I wanted to put the student creator in the driver's seat. And so I just put, find a partner, and write for yourself, what are some sticking points you're having with this project? What are some difficulties? What questions do you have? Now find a partner and run by your questions, difficulties, and sticking points and get some advice. You don't have to just say, what do you like and not like about my work? You can say, Hey, I feel like I might need to rework this part. Or, hey, I feel like I might need to have a better transition here. Or, I'm not sure if this part of the food truck is working. Or, I'm not sure about this metaphor that I'm using, or whatever it is, right? And the peer can really get structured feedback on things that matter to them. And in that way, sort of increase their confidence and their sense of self-efficacy that they can encounter a problem, figure out what the problem is, and get help with the problem and move on, as opposed to maybe peer feedback that will make them feel frustrated because they're being critiqued for things that they thought were good or critiqued for things that they don't understand. The next piece of the puzzle on feedback was to create a student reflection sheet. And so I wanted students to really reflect and sort of have that moment of getting outside themselves and thinking about where they got stuck, where they grew, where they might like to go next in terms of their creative output. So in the student reflection, I asked them to think about their process wins. As they were working on the project, how did they grow? How did they think differently or research differently or create differently or improve some aspect of their work? And then on the flip side, what were their process questions? Where did they get stuck? What might they need more help with? How might they grow the next time they do a project? Is it to do with their time framing, or, did they struggle with finding good sources, or did they struggle with revision or whatever? A chance for them to reflect. Similarly, what are they proud of about what they created? What were their favorite parts of their work? What were their questions for a teacher giving feedback to them? What do they wish that they could get more ideas on? And then goals for the future. The next time they're working on a project, what do they hope to achieve? So now they've had some peer feedback that was very driven by their own needs. They've made a final version. Now they're reflecting on their final version. And then also with that final version, when you do a project gallery at the end, I designed some little compliment cards for students to fill out for each other as they're viewing the project. So this is another form of positive feedback students can get without any help from the teacher, right? It's just another layer that's not exhausting for the teacher. And then finally, I created a teacher rubric. And I took my cue from Jennifer Gonzalez's concept. I don't think it's her concept actually, but I enjoyed her write-up all about the single point rubric and how much it can simplify things. And so I really created the final rubric for the teacher based on this idea of the single point rubric, where teachers can run through the categories of process, voice, connections, innovation, and form with the sort of clear direction. Did the student give time to the process? Did they bring their own unique personal style and perspective? Did they make connections to the unit? Did they come up with an innovative final product? Did they take care to learn about the form that they were trying to work inside, and did they do a good job using it? Those are sort of the categories, and the student either did, and you can talk about how they did such a great job, or maybe they struggled with a little bit, and you can give some advice on how they might do better with one of those categories, or two or three or whatever. But it's really a simplifying rubric, and it's something that you can apply to any of the options. And that is the crucial thing, right? You can talk about a student's process and voice and innovation and form, whether they were working on a one-pager or a genre adaptation or a video or a podcast, etc. And so that's very simplifying. It's going to keep you out of the trap that I was in way back when with my students' giant stack of Scarlet Letter projects. And that's what I want for you. Okay, so now I think you're ready to try creating a final differentiated project of your own based on a choice board. We've walked through the steps. You start by creating the board. Choose your options from work you've done before. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. Link it all together in one slide deck for easy student access, and then add feedback and reflection options that work for every option and don't exhaust your work capacity. Your students can get feedback from their peers. They can get reflection from themselves, and that is good for them. And they can get feedback from you as the final layer. Okay, my friend, that's all for today. Thanks so much for joining me. Until next time, take care of yourself and stay creative.